creates a very cool atmosphere.
Nice submission. The narrator added a ton, and the story you told was very interesting. That really sold it.
Atmosphere was fantastic.
Neat. Love the art
This
style.
game is so charming. I love the aesthetic you built. It really reminded me of Joel.
This is the most
creative game I have seen.
really
Really
cool
cool
atmosphere.
atmosphere.
I'm amazed.
I really like your interesting take on the
which is just
theme with the
lovely.
story.
The
atmosphere is
approach.
thick, and the voiceover is nice.
I have no idea what this brilliant piece of philosophy and other stuff is, but it feels almost psychedelic. Alright, so you just got done watching the game trailer for not my most recent game, but one of the games I recently made called the Backrooms Roll the Dice. It was produced for the Game Maker's Toolkit Game Jam, which I ended up sort of signing up for on a lark, not realizing it was one of the largest game jams in the world. I believe it was the largest on Twitch with over 6,125 entries, so I just decided to throw my hat in the ring with 6,124 other people creating dice games because the theme was Roll the Dice. This was sort of right after, in July, like mid-July. I had pulled like an all-nighter making Skiggugly, and I was kind of thrown for a loop. So development-wise, I ended up kind of extending a break because I was planning on producing a game through that week, but ended up just sort of lounging for a while, and I stumbled onto this Game Maker's Toolkit Game Jam. I didn't even know he ran a game jam. This was the first time I had heard of it properly, and so when I found out about it, I was like, oh yeah, I can shrink my development window so that the previous 3 days or so weren't lost development time. I was just getting ready for and recuperating for the game jam, which ended up being basically like a day and a half of really hardcore development before I had to take a trip out of town. But yeah, the actual development ended up being like a day and a half of this Roll the Dice theme, which I found quite fascinating. At the mention of another YouTube group, the Shut Up and Sit Down, back in 2019, I attended a talk by one of the hosts of that YouTube channel on the history of board games. Now, that talk delved briefly on the origins of dice. Historically, and this is all covered in the game, so if you played the game, this might be a bit repetitive, but if you're just interested in the game dev side, dice came from bones, hence roll the bones as a older phrase. But way back, you would have shamans sort of casting bones into these pits and judging the random assortment of said bones, the way they landed, to sort of bring out like an interpretation of the future of where it was going. Because when you're doing this sort of thing, when you're rolling something and seeing how physically it plays out, you're seeing how as like a chance, like some set of chances, like the random odds of things landing a certain way, and you're sort of conflating the way in which that chance plays out into what the future might play out. And so those bones then, those bones that were used to interpret the future, ended up growing more complex in that like people would start carving them and adding like ornate instructions on them, very very similar to those kind of origami things that would like fold up and you would get like a certain message on the inside. Like if a bone landed a certain way, like a simple word or phrase or like number would be inscribed on it. And eventually you saw that shape of that bone, those carved back bones, you would see that shape become all of these sort of uniform shapes that we now know today as the dice that we use. I mean, in early games, even like Sonnet and the rural game of like, funnily enough, four-sided dice were very common. And then of course there was the concept of the platonic solids, like these sort of early theories on atoms, on like the physical makeup of reality when you get down to the smallest possible level. You had this idea in Greek antiquity that these shapes, these traditional dice shapes, were integral to the making of the world, of making up the matter or the fire or the water, like all the different facets of reality that could be encountered, were thought to or theorized to be constructed by these base shapes. These base shapes then being the dice, then being used in something like modern day RPGs, which, as a total aside, I find it very fascinating how recent historically RPGs are, given that really all you need technologically is dice and paper and imagination. But I digress. That is neither here nor there. What I find fascinating and relevant, and what I brought up in the game, is that then, so you've got these core shapes, these dice shapes that are rolled to predict the future, then like being applied to actually casting in stone the future and events of RPGs, in effect using the shapes that were thought to make the world to then be the shapes that actually make like sort of these figurative imaginary worlds. I think there's an interesting sort of through line there of these dice shapes being integral in historical and philosophical terms, being integral to that construction, being literally, figuratively applied to these fictional RPG worlds. I think there's a lot of weird interpretation there that I think can be taken in perhaps a lot of more unhinged directions, but just pointing it out, I think, is certainly worth doing, and because I made a game about pointing that exact thing out. To that end, I made it a walking simulator, in part because those are the games, one, I know how to make, because I've made now like 9 of them, 6 of them publicly available. And just, I think I'm probably going to get into this in more detail in a future video, but I still find it baffling how few walking simulators there are. I mean, this is easily, I wouldn't be making these types of games if they weren't my favorite genre, because they are in fact my favorite genre. There are bafflingly few of them. Like, I've played like fewer than 20 or 30 of these for as easy as they are to approach and produce, because really all you need is a first-person controller, the audio commentary logs that you can produce yourself. Like, anybody with a microphone and a computer strong enough to like run the Unity editor can put out these walking simulator style games within a week, probably. But there's still so few. There's so few, and I think this is, again, total aside. I think part of that might be that just people with a writerly temperament tend to not get into game development very much. But who knows? That's again neither here nor there. As far as the technical aspects are concerned for this one, the Backrooms Roll the Dice is one of the first games that I really leaned into the use of multiple scenes in Unity. I had like this really nice, you walk into it, it transfers you to another scene sort of deal, so I didn't have to worry with the audio overlapping and the way that had been complained about in prior games that I'd made. Like Bean Game, I think, is in a way elevated by that level of convoluted audio. In fact, you got a sense of that kind of audio overlap in the opening to this video. So if you want more of that, but way more unhinged and talking about memes and meme history, give Bean Game a try. But for this game, I definitely wanted the audio logs to be short, approachable, very specific, and arguably educational. Like this is arguably a kind of a museum adjacent style approach to games, which I think is where I'm headed, at least in the short to midterm, for a lot of my game design. I like the idea of producing these sort of digital museums. Making a return from the previous games, Guggly, or How the Internet Might Kill Us All, had NPCs in the form of these large dice. A sort of really, really basic one YouTube tutorial of like a follow routine. And then what I did was instead of having it, I had like this separate object sort of nested around, or like the secondary object is parented beneath. Okay, so no. Oh my god, I'm terrible when it comes to these sort of technical explanations. Let me try to think this through here. The object was, so there was one invisible object that the CGI dice image was then parented beneath, or parented to. When I say parented to, I mean like the invisible core object with the AI design, like the rudimentary AI with the pathing program. The dice then was parented to that and given like a basic spin script to sort of spin it around in a circle so that you could see multiple faces, because dice spin. And then in addition, another larger invisible object was sort of nested on top of that, so that when you encounter the dice, it then transports you instantaneously to an end card scene that lets you reset the game, because you're in essence being you're being consumed or like destroyed by these platonic solids. And then of course the end of the game is another one of these sort of end card sequences, which I find very reminiscent of like old silent films in a way. The end of this particular game, spoilers for the Backrooms Roll the Dice, last chance to play it without getting spoiled. You roll the dice, you roll the platonic solids, which I infer, because in this particular game they are like the platonic solids are being realized as these dice. The idea of you rolling the platonic solids then is a kind of invitation to change the fundamental properties of what these solids represent. So when you roll a dice that is a cube, for instance, the cube represents Earth, suddenly the physics of like physical material, like Earth being like solids as a class of physical matter, is suddenly fundamentally changed. As it, like I make a joke in my next game, which I will make a video about next Monday, so look forward to that. The idea of like the water dice landing on 9 suddenly makes all ice or like otherwise liquid material is now solid. It's kind of a fun little nod to Cat's Cradle there. Would recommend that book. Pretty fun book. So yeah, like in the end of the game, you roll all the platonic solids. Everything is upended. It's all crazy. And speaking of crazy, you would be absolutely crazy not to give me money. You would be out of your mind not to donate to my Patreon. The rest of this video is just chilling, talking about the new like Patreon development. So click off this video if you don't want any shilling in your life. If you don't want any advertising or e-begging or whatever they call it these days. Panhandling, I think, is the arguably the more correct term. But yeah, so now I've got these plans for $25. You get like a little bitty image Easter egg. For $55, you get like a whole Easter egg room that I will make as per your general specifications. For $111, you get to add a whole alternate ending to one of my games. And for $250, I will make I will spend an entire week making a game as per your specifications. It will obviously, to the best of my ability, it'll be like kind of a walking simulator, sort of like these. But if you want me to explore a specific topic or concept to as much as I am capable of, with the depth and style that I am able to replicate, with perhaps some room for experimentation on that front as far as gameplay is concerned, should the time be allotted. Yeah, hit me up. For the like entry tiers, I've got a friend who's hosting up a Gmod server that you will have access to, as well as like a Discord community that's starting to grow, getting its footing. I want to make more walking simulators, and you who have listened this far, you can help, even $1, because a dollar buys one vegetable, which I can then consume to continue producing video games. Anyway, thank you for your time, and thank you for playing the Backrooms Roll the Dice. I had the feedback at the beginning. I didn't really talk about the feedback much. Not an illithid. That's why I put the little sick there. I guess bonus lesson. Sick stands for like something being incorrect in a phrase or quote. In this case, not an illithid. Illithids are copyrighted for Wizards of the Coast. Not an illithid. I am canonically an octopus wizard. There is just a little octopus in top of a big robe. That is the canon. That is not changing. No. He is not some weird future human coming to the past to do conquests. He's just an octopus wizard. And a metaphor for myself. As for the rest of the praise, loved it all. All the reviews were very nice to get from the Game Maker's Toolkit. I guess this is actually circling way back around. This is getting more involved. I guess bonus material for the people who were willing to stick around for the Patreon plug. The idea of just getting feedback and praise for your work. It's weirdly rare these days. I guess it's mainly because I don't have a lot of people engaging with my work quite yet. But what praise and feedback I did get, it was, I think, very, very valuable in like letting me know that this was a thing. This was a type of game. This was a concept that people resonated with enough to get me to continue to produce it. I think I don't think I would have stuck with game design as vehemently as I have decided to without that feedback, in a way. Not to say that the feedback is like what I'm relying on, but the feedback let me know for certain that like, oh yeah, this is a thing that does resonate with people. This is a thing that can educate and edify with regards to these more esoteric and like distant topics. So I think there's a lot you could do with these types of games that just isn't being done. But I'm gonna do it. I want to do it, and you can help. Haha! This was still a Patreon plug. Hit me up. Even $1. Anyway, you get your credits. Get your name in the credits of the games. Anyway, that's all. This has been a rambly 18 minutes. I can't believe this video is so long. This video is so long. It's crazy, and you're still listening. You're still listening, and it's still going on. What a world. But yeah, thank you for listening this long. Thank you for playing Backrooms Roll the Dice. I've got one more Backrooms game left in me, I think. One that's already produced that I'll probably do a video on next week. But then also, I was trying to do 5 games in July. I failed. Only got the 4. I'll probably do a video on that particular aspect when that game gets finished, whenever that game happens to get finished. But we'll find out. We'll find out.